On a stormy night, I was home alone with a power outage. My boyfriend went out for fun despite the bad weather. I felt his brother's silent worry and struggled with my uncontrollable crush on him. The morning sunlight sneaks through the cracks in the curtains, gently landing on the tips of my hair. The warm, cozy blanket carries a faint scent of laundry detergent. When I open my eyes, my first instinct isn't to reach for my phone and check the alarm clock. Instead, I burst into laughter, staring up at the ceiling. Today, there's no early ballet practice, no mountain of homework piling up, and no nagging from mom and dad urging me to get out the door. It's an utterly, completely blank day, all mine. This feeling of being unbound by any schedule is like taking a bite of bread coated in icing, sweetly seeping into my heart. Before, I was always chasing after one appointment after another. My toes tapping to the rhythm of ballet, my pen scratching away at homework, even my very breath carrying a hurried pace. But today, I can just curl up in bed and stare into space, roll around with my pillow, do whatever I feel like, even just do absolutely nothing at all. Having a day completely unplanned like this is truly a little bit of luck hidden within the ordinary. At first, I felt a bit uneasy, almost as if it were a stolen happiness, always expecting the alarm clock to go off any second now. But after lying in bed for another half hour, stepping barefoot onto the slightly cool floor and sipping a glass of juice with ice, I completely fell in love with this freedom. Turns out, being carefree really means not having to rush against the clock, just following your own heart. I'm not talking about laziness. I'll always be someone who can't live without ballet, who values structure and strives for ultimate perfection, but that luxurious feeling of being able to choose what to do on your own terms, rather than being driven by external compulsion? That's right. I think I'm going to fall head over heels for this sensation. After returning from the supermarket, I spent most of the afternoon cleaning the house. Not just a perfunctory tidy-up like quickly wiping down the countertops, but a thorough spring cleaning done with genuine joy and enthusiasm. Humming the song I've been loving lately, I arrested one by one those dusty clumps that had been hiding under my bed for ages. As I gazed at the gleaming greenery on my windowsill, the neatly arranged desk, and even the air itself, which seemed to carry the fresh scent of lemon-based cleaner. Oh, that sense of accomplishment was more satisfying than having just performed a flawless ballet routine. When I finally collapsed onto the sofa, victorious, but with only a faint trace of lemon cleaner lingering on my skin, it was already past 3 o'clock. So I pulled out my laptop, hurriedly finishing up those assignments that had been lying at the bottom of my backpack like cursed relics. And then, since I'd been so incredibly productive, I figured I deserved to treat myself just a little bit. That's why, in the end, wrapped snugly in a blanket, I binge-watched an entire season of a show I never should have started in the first place. Is this show the kind of critically acclaimed, emotionally resonant masterpiece worthy of an Oscar? Of course not. It's a chaotic reality TV series about people marrying complete strangers and then going absolutely berserk over who gets the last piece of gâteau. Superstar, what are you up to? The reply came almost instantly, making me chuckle. At home, just relaxing and loafing around. How about you?
Same here.
Just realized I'm really good at doing absolutely nothing. I might even make a pro out of it. I'm 100% behind your career aspirations, I said with a smile, holding my phone against my chest for a moment. This simple, effortless back and forth feels so great. No pressure, no awkward tension, just the two of us. Outside, the day had started off sunny with a brilliantly blue sky, but by mid-afternoon, it had transformed into a soft, misty rain, a kind of weather where you can smell the wet pavement and hear the faint squeal of car tires on the street 3 blocks away. But now, everything has changed. The rain is growing heavier and heavier, drumming urgently against the windows. The sky has shifted from gloomy to a bruised purple. The thunder rumbles deep and drawn out, as if someone were dragging a mountain across the ground. I glance out the window, and as a self-proclaimed professional meteorologist, I can tell you this scene is straight out of every horror movie's opening sequence. You know the kind. An innocent girl is home alone, watching a reality show, going about her business completely oblivious when, bam, a serial killer bursts out of the pantry. Not today, Satan. I stand up, stretch my stiff legs, and head toward the kitchen. If I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory, at least I'll go out with a full belly. First, I turn up the TV volume a bit, because as everyone knows, noise can drive away demons and serial killers, and then I start rummaging through the fridge. Let's start with the vegetables. I tossed a pile of frozen broccoli and cauliflower onto a baking sheet, drizzled them generously with olive oil, enough to make my ancestors proud, and popped them into the oven. Then, I turned my attention to the chicken. I threw a few chicken breasts into a skillet, grabbed whatever seasonings were within reach. To be honest, just salt, pepper, and something that sounded vaguely Italian. Sprinkled them on liberally, and turned the heat to medium. The stove began to sizzle pleasantly. Thunder rumbled again, this time louder, like a sharp crack of a whip that gave me quite a start. The lights flickered once, then again, as if pondering whether to give up altogether. I froze mid-motion, my hand still hovering over the stove's control knob, staring up at the ceiling. No way. Not today. I stomped over to the TV and cranked up the volume several notches, just enough to drown out the voices of those idiots arguing over instant ramen noodles, drowning out the storm outside that was devouring the sky. It's not that I'm scared, not in the least. A storm is just a weather phenomenon, after all, a drama involving water, electricity, and clouds. Totally normal, totally fine. It's definitely not some ominous sign that the guy wearing a cheap clown mask is about to come after me. No way. I'm stirring chicken with a spatula that might actually be an Italian pasta spoon, leaning against the counter, and watching the storm batter the streets outside. This day has gotten so fast, so weird. 1 minute you're basking in the sunshine, sipping an iced coffee, feeling like you've got life completely under control. The next, a single clap of thunder makes you want to Google, "Can fear really kill you?" I shake my head and chuckle softly. It's okay. Everything's fine. Dinner's simmering away, the house is clean, homework is mostly done, Taylor's just a text message away, and my play is still waiting there, ready to corrode my brain in the most delightful way possible. This wasn't a terrible night, just a little noisy, that's all. Another clap of thunder shook the windows, and the lights flickered again, this time lasting a bit longer. I frowned, glaring up at the ceiling. Don't even think about it, I warned, brandishing the spatula and pointing it menacingly at the light overhead. They flickered once more, though I'd swear it had a hint of defiance, but they stayed on nonetheless. Victory.
Warm water streamed down my shoulders, rinsing over my back and washing away the day's grime and dirt. Physical labor has this uncanny, almost unparalleled healing quality. The roof patch needs to be fixed before the next downpour washes it away. The fence is leaning crookedly, as if it's trying to make a break for it. It's all just little things, but my parents can no longer climb ladders or dig out rotten wooden posts. When the afternoon rain finally started to fall, I wisely made my way inside. Now that I've dried off and changed into sweatpants, I'm getting ready to chop vegetables at the counter, just in case my parents decide to whip up dinner later on, so it'll be a bit easier for them. I'm quietly slicing away, my knife moving swiftly, the cutting board quickly filling up with neatly diced veggies. Yet somehow, I find myself thinking about Penny, the way she'd silently clench her fingers during our last get-together, neither submissive nor overly defiant. That quiet resilience she displayed, hidden beneath her composure, was far stronger than most people's. It wasn't until I heard the rustle of a bag that inexplicable warmth suddenly gave way to impatience. Taylor had suddenly sat down on the stool across from the kitchen island, one hand holding a bag of potato chips, while the other already had a handful stuffed into his mouth. He didn't even seem to notice the crumbs clinging to the corners of his lips. "Want some?" he asked, his mouth still half full, his tone laced with carefree abandon. I glanced at that greasy concoction, loaded with artificial cheese powder and salt, and felt a wave of discomfort in my stomach. I frowned and shook my head. He'd never change his ways, always focused solely on his own cravings, completely oblivious to the state of his body, let alone to how it affected those around him. He shrugged as if he thought I'd missed out on something wonderful, then went right on munching away. The sharp crunching sound stood out starkly in the quiet kitchen. I forced myself to suppress the revulsion welling up inside me and remain silent. "You're not having any chips?" he asked after a while, genuinely curious. No, I replied briefly, my tone icy and unyielding. He leaned back in his chair, deliberately chewing even louder, as if he were deliberately taunting me. Is it because of Navy regulations? He said, vaguely gesturing toward me with his chip. I scraped the chopped onions into the bowl with a bit more force than necessary, the blade clattering sharply against the cutting board. It's because I've got to stay alive. He burst into laughter, thinking I was joking. His clueless expression reminded me of the time at the dinner party when he joined his friends in mocking Penny, only now, my disgust was even deeper. He'd never be able to see anyone else's embarrassment, all he could do was follow the crowd and parrot whatever everyone else said. He was hopelessly dumb. I couldn't be bothered to set him straight. He took another bite of his chips and stared at me intently. Seriously, he said after a while, how hard could it really be? I mean, life in the Navy. I paused mid-motion, wiped the knife clean, my fingertips turning pale from the force with which I'd gripped it. He wasn't asking out of genuine curiosity, he was just bored and had nothing better to do. He'd never understand what responsibility or accountability really meant. The last time he'd seen me, he'd been 16, and I'd already been on the verge of leaving home, learning to shoulder everything on my own, while he'd still been luxuriating in his little greenhouse, wasting his time carefree. I rinsed the blade under the tap, keeping my head down as I replied, it's harder than you can imagine, but also easier than you might think. At least I know exactly what I should and shouldn't do. HMPH, he snorted. That's like saying nothing at all. It's the only answer you're ever going to get, he said, tossing a potato chip at me. The chip bounced off my arm, landed on the floor, and left greasy crumbs clinging to my sleeve. You're really annoying, he laughed loudly, completely oblivious to how rude his gesture was. At least you're not stupid, better than someone who can't tell the difference between right and wrong or care about how their actions affect others, I muttered under my breath. My words were unmistakably aimed at him, yet he remained blissfully unaware, laughing even harder as he grabbed another handful of chips and shoved them into his mouth. The house creaked around us, and outside, the wind howled low and steady, growing louder by the minute. The storm was still far from dangerous, but it was getting closer all the same. Taylor's phone began vibrating on the counter. He glanced at it briefly, and his eyes lit up instantly, his smile widening even more. Hey, he answered the phone. Nothing much, just hanging out. He grinned at the person on the other end, his eagerness impossible to hide. Oh? Really? I'd love to go. Great, I'll be there in a sec. He hung up and without another word, snatched his coat off the chair, not even bothering to check the weather outside. I'll just tell Mom and Dad I'm stepping out for a bit, he said as he slipped his arms into the sleeves. Shouldn't take too long. I raised an eyebrow, and suddenly a wave of irritation surged through me. My voice came out icy cold, almost trembling with barely contained fury. The storm's getting worse and worse. The roads are slick, visibility's terrible, yet you're still planning to head out. He waved his hand dismissively, completely unconcerned. It's only a 10-minute drive, I'll be fine. You're such an idiot, I said flatly, though inside, my disgust and anger were nearly overwhelming. Not only did he show zero concern for his own safety, but he hadn't even thought about Penny, who might now be home alone, facing the raging storm, plunged into sudden darkness and wondering if she was scared. He only cares about having fun, always so careless, so irresponsible. He's simply not worthy of Penny's true feelings. He just grinned, completely oblivious to the anger in my voice, and gave the counter 2 little pats. I love you too, bro. Then he walked out, and the door slammed shut behind him with a loud bang. The sudden silence made the sound of the wind outside seem even louder, and it only intensified the restlessness inside me. After I'd finished tidying up the counter, emptied the vegetable scraps into the trash, and polished the countertop until it gleamed, my fingertips still felt faintly numb. I couldn't help but think, were Penny's windows left open too? Was she home alone, maybe pretending to be calm even though she was scared, just like last time? A few minutes later, I started going around the house, checking the windows and locking the doors, being extra careful with every move. When I reached the entryway, I noticed that several windows were slightly ajar. Probably my mom had tried to air out the house earlier. I closed and locked the window, immediately feeling the chill of the storm kept safely outside. Yet somehow, I found myself strangely preoccupied with Penny, wondering if she'd been able to take good care of herself. And then I couldn't help but think, maybe she didn't need anyone's worry at all. After all, she was stronger than anyone else. When I returned to the kitchen, the house was already filled with an enticing aroma. The onions and garlic were sizzling in the pan, and fresh bread was warming up in the oven. My mom was standing by the stove now, her back turned to me as she stirred whatever was cooking in the pot. My dad stood beside her, slicing bread. As soon as I walked in, they both looked up. "Hey, honey," my mom said warmly, "is everything okay?" I nodded and sat down on a stool at the island counter, yet my mind was still full of Penny's image, the calm she'd forced upon herself during the dinner party, the weary look on her face when she'd fallen asleep, the gentle yet distant way she'd given thanks. Dad arranged the bread and started setting out the silverware. "Where's your little brother?" Mom asked, looking around. I shrugged, my tone tinged with an unspoken coolness. "He got a call and headed out, said he'd be back soon." She frowned slightly but didn't argue. Boys will be boys, people always use that stupid phrase to excuse idiotic behavior, but he's not a boy anymore, it's time he started acting like an adult. So, Dad poured 3 glasses of water. "How does it feel to be home again?" I shrugged, pondering just how honest I should be. "It's different," I finally said. He nodded, as if he understood, or maybe, in some way, he really did. He'd left home at a young age too. The reasons were different, the times were different, but deep down, it was all the same. Everyone knows what responsibility means. "All right," Mom turned off the stove and carried the pot to the table. "We're so glad you're back." We were sitting around the kitchen table, plates piled high with food, while outside, the storm rumbled on like some giant clearing its throat. "So," Mom said, clearly trying to sound casual, "how long do you plan to stay?" I shrugged. "I'm not sure yet." "Great," she said immediately. "You need time, just stay right here." Dad pointed at me with his fork. "You need to relax. No orders, no training, no alarms, just chores." I muttered under my breath, "Chores will toughen you up." Dad said seriously, "Chores will build your character." I chuckled quietly at the bread, but deep down, I was still thinking about Penny. Mom shook her head fondly. "Don't pay attention to your dad. We're just glad you're home." For the next few minutes, we fell into a relaxed rhythm of eating. The clinking of forks and the roar of the storm outside filled the gaps between our words. Then Dad put down his cup and said, "Oh, by the way, I've invited Penny over for dinner tomorrow." I shot up to look at him, raising an eyebrow. For some reason, my heart felt strangely relieved. At least now she wouldn't have to eat frozen food all by herself at home, wouldn't have to face this damn storm alone, and wouldn't have to force herself to stay strong. "I just think, in weather like this, she really shouldn't be eating frozen food by herself," he added. Mom immediately perked up, wiping her hands on the napkin. "I was thinking of making lasagna. Do you think she'd like lasagna?" "Everyone loves lasagna," Dad said. Mom laughed so hard she almost choked on her water. "Poor kid," Dad said, his voice filled with genuine sympathy. Mom's gaze softened as she replied, "She's such a sweet girl, I don't like seeing her all by herself, it just breaks your heart to watch her. She's tougher than she looks." I blurted out, my tone carrying an undertone of defense even I hadn't noticed. "I respect her resilience and don't want anyone to think she's weak or easy to take advantage of. I feel deeply for her quiet endurance, knowing how much humiliation lies hidden beneath that calm exterior. She's not a girl who needs pity, she deserves respect and to be treated with kindness." They all turned to look at me, not exactly with skepticism, but more with curiosity, probably surprised that I'd say such things about a girl. Mom smiled and said, "It's so nice to hear you say that, it seems like you think highly of her too." Dad grinned and added, "Maybe you've finally made a friend, Ash." I frowned and shot him a sharp glance, my voice clipped, "She's not my friend. I couldn't be her friend, I'm the older brother of her boyfriend. All I can do is watch from afar, silently protect her, and keep any other thoughts firmly in check." "Really?" he drawled, clearly not believing a word of it. Mom clapped her hands together, "Lasagna, salad, and maybe even a little lemon cake. so she can take some home with her after she's finished. Dad pretended to feel faint. You really are an angel. Flattery'll get you dessert, she laughed heartily. They started chatting casually about groceries and recipes, and I sat there listening, but deep down, my mind was busy plotting. Tomorrow when Penny comes over, if Taylor's still as clueless as last time, I'm done holding back. And if the weather stays bad, I could swing by on my way to pick her up, just to make sure she gets home safely. I let their warmth envelop me naturally, yet inside, I carried a quiet, unspoken concern. The respect and care I felt for Penny were like vines creeping silently through my heart, and I had to clamp down hard on them, refusing to let them surface. Dinner came to an end. Together, we began clearing the table, scraping off leftovers from plates, rinsing dishes, and loading them into the dishwasher. As I was wiping down the counter, an unexpected thing happened. The lights flickered once, then again. And then the whole house plunged into darkness. The TV suddenly cut off mid-sentence. The clock on the stove went dark. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. For a fleeting moment, the only sounds were the rain pounding fiercely against the windows and the sharp crackling of an electrical appliance nearby that had just shorted out. Well, Dad said in the darkness, now we're in trouble. Mom burst into laughter, more amused than worried. I stood quietly for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness, carefully listening to the distant rumble of thunder. Yet in that instant, my mind raced straight to Penny. Was her power out too? Was she home alone? Would she be scared? That worry surged over me like a tidal wave, pressing down so heavily that I could barely breathe. But all I could do was stand here, helpless and unable to do anything. After all, I was her boyfriend's older brother. I had no right to care about her, let alone any right to go looking for her. She can only silently pray in her heart that she'll take good care of herself. I hope her strength really can ward off all her fears.